Widowed mother bought this house for pennies, but what she found was worth millions. Sarah Mitchell pressed her trembling fingers against the yellowed paper of the purchase contract, still in disbelief at the amount she had just paid for the property. Widowed for 2 years and with her savings nearly depleted, she knew this was her last chance to provide a new home for her son Tommy. The real estate agent had been clear about the ridiculously low price of the house on the outskirts of Fredericksburg, but his words of caution still echoed in her mind like a dark omen. The property was being sold for only $1,200, an amount that wouldn't even buy a decent used car. Sarah watched the 10-year-old boy walk beside her on the dirt road, his steps cautious on the loose stones. Tommy carried a small cardboard suitcase holding his few belongings, and his brown eyes shone with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Moving to that distant place represented a fresh start that she both desired and feared. The house appeared on the horizon like a ghostly structure, with its peeling walls and windows fogged by time. Sarah felt a tightness in her chest as she realized the property looked even more dilapidated than the photographs had shown. The roof had several broken tiles, and the wooden fence marking the property line was collapsed in several spots. As they approached the main entrance, Sarah noticed something that intrigued her. All the windows of the house had locks on the outside, as if someone wanted to prevent people from getting out from inside. It was a strange feature the agent hadn't mentioned during the previous visits. Tommy stopped abruptly and tugged on the sleeve of his mother's brown dress, drawing her attention to a detail she had missed. On the main door, there was a small, rusty plaque with the name of the property engraved in letters nearly erased by time. St. Benedict's Studio, Sarah read quietly, trying to decipher the words corroded by rust. The name suggested the house had served artistic purposes in the past, but she couldn't imagine what kind of art could have been produced in such an isolated place. As they neared the porch, Sarah noticed movement in the neighboring houses. Curtains shifted slightly, and she had the uncomfortable impression of being watched by curious eyes. The feeling of being judged by strangers made her quicken her pace, eager to enter the privacy of her new dwelling. The key grated in the old lock as Sarah turned it for the first time. The door opened with a prolonged groan of rusty hinges, revealing a dark interior that smelled of mold and abandonment. Sunlight filtered through the foggy windows, creating ghostly patterns on the worn wooden floor. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Sarah took her first steps inside the house and felt the floorboards creak under her feet. The sound echoed through the empty space, creating an even more melancholic atmosphere. Tommy followed close behind, his large eyes examining every corner with the typical curiosity of a child exploring unknown territory. The first room was a spacious living area with a stone fireplace that occupied almost an entire wall. The walls were covered in a layer of dust that made it impossible to distinguish the original paint color. Sarah ran her finger over one of the surfaces and left a clean mark, revealing that beneath the grime there was a light blue paint. Tommy ran to one of the windows and tried to open it to air out the room, but the external lock prevented any movement. Sarah approached him and examined the strange mechanism, trying to understand why someone would install locks on the outside of the windows. The discovery left her unsettled, as if there were hidden secrets in that property she had yet to uncover. As they explored the other rooms on the first floor, Sarah found evidence that the house had been inhabited recently. In the kitchen, household utensils were carefully arranged in the cabinets, as if the former occupant had left expecting to return soon. The pots were clean and organized, and there were even spices on the shelves that hadn't expired yet. The dining room contained a solid wood oval table surrounded by 6 chairs that appeared to have been handmade. Sarah ran her fingers over the smooth surface of the table and realized it was a piece of exceptional quality, far superior to what she would expect to find in a house sold for such a low price. Tommy discovered a narrow staircase leading to the second floor and began to climb the wooden steps that creaked with every footstep. Sarah followed him, concerned about the safety of the house's old structures. On the upper floor, they found 3 bedrooms and a bathroom, all furnished simply but functionally. The largest bedroom had a double bed with a hand-carved headboard and an antique wardrobe that took up almost an entire wall. Sarah opened the wardrobe doors and was surprised to find men's clothing still hanging on the hangers, as if the owner had left in a hurry without time to pack. In the smaller room, which had clearly been used by a child, Tommy found forgotten toys on a low shelf. There were wooden cars, a rocking horse, and several children's books with pages yellowed by time. Sarah felt a pang of sadness, imagining the family that had lived there, and wondered what circumstances could have forced them to abandon their belongings. The bathroom revealed more evidence of a hasty departure. Personal hygiene products were still lined up on the shelf above the sink, and there were clean towels folded in the cabinet. Sarah began to feel like an intruder in strangers' lives, even though she knew she had purchased the property completely legally. It was when she decided to explore the attic that the first truly intriguing discovery happened. Tommy had found a trap door in the ceiling of the second-floor hallway and insisted on going up to investigate. Sarah helped him pull down the folding ladder and went up first to check if it was safe. The attic was filled with objects covered by dusty sheets, creating mysterious shapes in the dim light. Sarah pulled back one of the covers and revealed a stack of painting canvases leaning against the wall. Even in the faint light from the trapdoor, she could tell they were works of art of impressive quality. Tommy climbed into the attic and began exploring the other covered objects, discovering brushes, tubes of paint, and other painting materials carefully organized in wooden boxes. The place had clearly served as an artist's studio, explaining the name St. Benedict Studio that was engraved on the front door. Sarah discovered a professional easel positioned near a skylight that allowed natural light to enter. The equipment was in perfect condition, as if it had been used recently. She imagined the artist working in that space, creating the works that were scattered throughout the attic. It was then that Tommy made the discovery that would completely change the course of their lives. While rummaging through a pile of old papers, he found a collection of letters yellowed by time, all addressed to Tommy Mitchell. Sarah froze upon hearing her son's full name spoken. The letters were sealed and appeared never to have been opened. Sarah took one of them with trembling hands and read the address written by hand in careful script. The recipient's name was identical to Tommy's, and the address corresponded exactly to the house where they were now. Tommy looked at his mother with wide eyes, clearly disturbed by the impossible coincidence of finding letters with his name in a house they had just bought. Sarah tried to find a rational explanation, but she couldn't imagine how that could have happened by chance. She decided to open one of the letters to try to understand the mystery. The paper was of superior quality, and there was a red wax seal that broke easily under her fingers. Inside, she found a letter written in elegant Portuguese dated 20 years ago. "My dear Pedro," the letter began, "I hope this message finds you in good health. As promised, I have left clues about the family treasure hidden on the property. Follow the directions in the other letters, and you will discover riches that will change your life forever." Sarah felt her heart race as she read the words. The letter was signed by Uncle Benjamin Mitchell, a name she did not know, but which suggested kinship with her family. The possibility that there was a real treasure hidden on the property seemed absurd, but the specificity of the information left her intrigued. Tommy insisted on opening the other letters to discover more clues about the supposed treasure. The second letter contained a rudimentary map of the house, with several points marked in red ink. The indicated locations included the basement, the back garden, and an area near the old carriage house that stood separate from the main house. The third letter offered detailed instructions on how to find a special key hidden behind the fireplace in the main room. According to the instructions, this key would open a secret compartment where important documents about the Mitchell family inheritance were kept. Sarah came down from the attic with the letters in her hands, still trying to process the extraordinary information she had discovered. The coincidence of her son's name with the recipient of the letters seemed impossible to explain by chance. She began to wonder if the purchase of the house had been truly random, or if there were greater forces directing her steps. In the main room, she and Tommy carefully examined the stone fireplace, following the instructions from the third letter. Behind one of the side stones, they found a small cavity where a golden key with intricate designs engraved on its surface was hidden. The discovery of the key confirmed that the letters were genuine and that there really was some kind of organized system for revealing secrets about the property. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety as she realized she might be about to discover something that would change her financial life forever. Following the directions on the map, they went down to the basement of the house to look for the compartment that would be opened by the special key. The basement was damp and dark, lit only by a bare bulb hanging from the low ceiling. The walls were bare stone, and there was a strong smell of dampness that suggested water leakage problems. Tommy found a wall that seemed different from the others, with stones arranged in a slightly irregular pattern. Sarah examined the area carefully and discovered that one of the stones could be moved, revealing a small, well-preserved lock hidden behind it. The golden key fit perfectly into the lock, and a soft click indicated that the mechanism had been unlocked. An entire section of the wall moved aside, revealing a secret compartment that had remained hidden for decades. Inside the compartment, Sarah found a carved wooden box containing documents carefully preserved on parchment paper. The documents included birth certificates, property deeds, and what appeared to be a detailed will signed by Benjamin Mitchell. The will revealed surprising information about the history of the property and the inheritance being left to the young Tommy Mitchell. According to the document, Benjamin had been a recognized artist who amassed considerable wealth through the sale of his works to private collectors and museums. Sarah read aloud the clauses of the will that specified that all of Benjamin's fortune and artworks were to be inherited by Tommy Mitchell, but only when he turned 10 years old and was accompanied by his widowed mother. The conditions matched exactly the current situation of Sarah and her son. The revelation that her son was the legal heir to a fortune left Sarah in a state of shock. She reread the documents several times to make sure she wasn't misinterpreting the information. The papers seemed legitimate and were accompanied by official stamps confirming their authenticity. Tommy, still trying to understand the implications of the discovery, asked his mother if this meant they wouldn't have to worry about money anymore. Sarah hugged him with tears in her eyes, realizing that the house bought for pennies could really be worth millions, exactly as the title of the story she was living suggested. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. The next day, Sarah decided to look for information about Benjamin Mitchell in the town of Fredericksburg. She left Tommy playing in the backyard of the house and walked to the historic center, where she hoped to find people who might have known the artist mentioned in the will. At the first shop she visited, a small bookstore near the Rosary Church, the elderly proprietor frowned upon hearing the name Benjamin Mitchell. Mrs. Eleanor, a lady with white hair and thick glasses, seemed to recognize the name immediately, but her reaction was one of discomfort rather than joy. Benjamin Mitchell, murmured Mrs. Eleanor, shaking her head negatively. That name hasn't been spoken around here for a long time, my dear. You shouldn't be meddling with these things. Sarah was intrigued by the lady's reaction and asked why the artist's name caused so much discomfort. Mrs. Eleanor looked around nervously before leaning closer and whispering her answer. That man disappeared overnight 20 years ago, leaving his sister desperate and full of debt. Mrs. Christine never recovered from the trauma of losing her brother so suddenly. And that house where you live, my dear, no one can stay there for long. The information about a sister named Christine was not mentioned in the documents Sarah had found. She asked the bookstore owner where she could find this woman to clarify some details about her son's inheritance. Mrs. Eleanor hesitated before providing the information, clearly worried about the consequences of revealing Christine's location. She explained that Benjamin's sister lived in a simple house on the outskirts of town and worked as a seamstress to support her family. Sarah got the address and immediately headed to Christine Mitchell's residence. The house was small and well kept, with a front garden full of colorful flowers that contrasted with the simplicity of the structure. She knocked on the door with some apprehension, not knowing how she would be received. Christine answered the door, and Sarah was surprised by the woman's appearance. She was younger than expected, perhaps in her 50s, with brown hair tied in a bun and eyes that revealed a weariness accumulated over the years. "How may I help you?" asked Christine politely, but Sarah noticed her eyes narrowed slightly when she mentioned the name of Benjamin Mitchell and the ownership of St. Benedict's studio. Sarah explained about purchasing the house and discovering the documents in the basement, carefully observing Christine's reactions during the account. The woman's expression went through several changes, including surprise, distrust, and something that seemed to be fear. "You shouldn't have touched those things," said Christine, her voice trembling slightly. "My brother left clear instructions that no one was to touch his belongings. You need to return everything and leave that house immediately." Christine's extreme reaction left Sarah even more convinced she had discovered something important. She asked why Benjamin's sister was so concerned about the inheritance intended for Tommy, especially considering the documents seemed legitimate. "Legitimate?" repeated Christine, her voice rising in pitch. "My brother never had children, much less would he leave an inheritance to strangers. Those papers you found must be forgeries created to deceive gullible people like you." Sarah showed Christine a copy of the will she had brought with her, watching attentively as the woman examined the document. Christine read each line with increasing care, and her expression gradually changed from distrust to something close to panic. "Where did you find this?" asked Christine in a tense voice, her hands trembling as she held the paper. "This is indeed my brother's handwriting, but I don't understand how these documents can exist. Benjamin told me everything, and he never mentioned anything about an heir." The confirmation that the handwriting was indeed Benjamin's strengthened Sarah's position, but also increased her curiosity about why Christine seemed so disturbed. She asked if the sister could provide more information about the artist's disappearance. Christine looked around nervously before inviting Sarah into her home. The living room was modestly furnished, but Sarah noticed several paintings on the walls that had clearly been made by the same person who created the works in the attic of St. Benedict's studio. "My brother was a complicated man," began Christine, serving tea in delicate porcelain cups. "He was brilliant as an artist, but he was also very private and sometimes made decisions without consulting anyone. On the day he disappeared, he said he needed to resolve an important matter but gave no details." Sarah asked if Christine knew of any reason that might have led Benjamin to leave an inheritance to an unknown child. The artist's sister hesitated for a long moment before revealing a piece of information she had kept secret for 20 years. "There was a woman," said Christine in a low voice, "a young woman my brother met in New York when he went to exhibit his works there. She was married but was going through serious problems at home. Benjamin fell hopelessly in love with her, but he never told me the details of the relationship." The revelation about a possible secret romance of Benjamin ignited a new possibility in Sarah's mind. She asked if Christine knew the woman's name or any other information that could help clarify the connection to the inheritance. "Her name was Elizabeth," said Christine. "Elizabeth Mitchell. I know it was her married name, not her maiden name. Benjamin spoke of her with such affection, but always with a deep sadness in his eyes. I believe she represented a great, impossible love in his life." The surname Mitchell made Sarah's heart race. It was possible there was a real family connection between her late husband and the missing artist. She asked Christine if there was more information about Elizabeth Mitchell that could help clarify the mystery. "I only know she had a young son at the time," continued Christine, "and that she was going through serious financial difficulties. Benjamin always sent her money, even after the relationship ended. He said it was his responsibility to take care of her and the boy." The information about Elizabeth Mitchell's son made Sarah realize there might be a direct link between Tommy and Benjamin. If Elizabeth were her mother-in-law, that would explain why the artist had left an inheritance to a child with the same name and surname. Sarah asked Christine for any document or photograph that could confirm Elizabeth Mitchell's identity. Benjamin's sister went to an old cabinet and returned with a small wooden box containing letters and photographs yellowed with time. Among the photographs, Sarah found an image that left her breathless. It was a picture of Benjamin next to a young, beautiful woman holding a child in her arms. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "Benjamin, Elizabeth, and little Robert, New York, 1985. Robert was the name of Sarah's late husband. The photograph confirmed that there was indeed a family connection between Benjamin and Tommy through his father. Sarah felt tears of emotion roll down her face as she realized the inheritance was not an accident, but the result of a deep love Benjamin felt for his adoptive family. Christine observed Sarah's emotional reaction and gradually understood the situation. She asked if Robert Mitchell was really Tommy's father, and Sarah confirmed with a nod, still too emotional to speak. "So, Tommy really is Elizabeth's grandson," murmured Christine, her expression softening for the first time since Sarah had arrived. "That explains why my brother left such specific instructions about the inheritance. He wanted to take care of Elizabeth's family, even after his own departure." The discovery of the real family connection brought relief and validation to Sarah, who had begun to question if she was chasing an illusion. Now she knew that Benjamin's will was genuine and that Tommy had a legitimate right to the inheritance. Christine offered to help Sarah better understand the scope of the inheritance left by Benjamin. She explained that her brother had been a very successful artist, with works in important private collections and exhibitions in major museums across the country. "The paintings in the attic of the house," said Christine, "are just a small part of Benjamin's work. There are many more pieces scattered around, some in museums and others in private collections, but he always kept the best creations for himself." Sarah asked how she could assess the real value of the works she had found. Christine suggested contacting an art expert who had worked with Benjamin during his most productive years, a man named Professor Arthur Thompson, who still lived in Boston. The meeting with Christine ended on a positive note, with Benjamin's sister offering to help Sarah navigate the process of claiming the inheritance. She admitted she had felt guilty for not looking for Elizabeth Mitchell after her brother's disappearance, and now saw an opportunity to correct that omission. Sarah returned home with a renewed sense of purpose and a much better understanding of the situation she was in. She told Tommy about the discovery of the family connection to Benjamin and explained that the inheritance was legitimate and significant. That night, mother and son examined the paintings in the attic more carefully, now knowing they were works created by a recognized artist. Even to untrained eyes, it was possible to perceive the exceptional quality of the pieces and the sophisticated technique employed in their creation. Tommy found a painting depicting a young woman holding a child, and Sarah immediately recognized it as a portrait of Elizabeth Mitchell with Robert as a baby. The discovery moved her deeply, as it represented the loving connection Benjamin felt for the family he had adopted as his own. The next day, Sarah contacted Professor Arthur Thompson in Boston and scheduled a visit for him to evaluate the works found in the attic. The professor was enthusiastic about the prospect of seeing Benjamin's creations again, confirming that the artist had indeed left an important legacy in the world of American art. The trip to Boston was the first time Sarah and Tommy had left Fredericksburg since moving. They brought detailed photographs of all the paintings found, along with copies of the documents proving the inheritance. Professor Thompson received them in his elegant office in the city center, surrounded by works of art and books about American art. He was a man in his 70s, with white hair and glasses that revealed bright eyes full of intelligence and experience. "Benjamin Mitchell," said the professor nostalgically, "was one of the most talented artists of his generation. His works combined classical technique with modern sensibility in a way few could master. It's a tragedy that he disappeared so early, at the height of his creativity." The professor carefully examined each photograph Sarah had brought, taking notes in a notebook and occasionally exclaiming in surprise. Several times he stopped to study a specific detail, clearly moved to be seeing works he believed were lost forever. "These are some of Benjamin's finest creations," said Professor Thompson, after examining all the material. "It includes the American Motherhood series he was developing before his disappearance. Collectors have been searching for these pieces for years." Sarah asked about the value of the works, and the professor's answer left her stunned. He estimated the complete collection could be worth between $15 and $20 million, depending on the preservation conditions and the authenticity of the pieces. "Of course," said the professor, "an in-person appraisal will be necessary to confirm the authenticity and state of conservation. But based on what I see in these photographs, you have a fortune in art on your hands." The confirmation of the extraordinary value of the works left Sarah in a state of shock. She had bought the house for $1,200 and discovered an inheritance worth millions. It was exactly the dramatic twist the story's title promised. Professor Thompson offered to travel to Fredericksburg to conduct the in-person appraisal of the works. He explained that it would be necessary to carefully document each piece and obtain certificates of authenticity before any commercial transaction could be considered. During the trip back home, Sarah reflected on the dramatic changes that had happened in her life in just a few days. From a poor widow struggling to support her son, she had become the guardian of one of the country's most valuable art collections. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The arrival of Professor Thompson in Fredericksburg the following week marked the beginning of a new phase in Sarah's journey. The art expert came accompanied by an assistant specialized in conservation and professional equipment to photograph and catalogue the works. The in-person appraisal confirmed the most optimistic expectations about the value of the collection. Professor Thompson found works that weren't even recorded in his archives about Benjamin Mitchell, including preparatory studies for famous paintings that were in important museums. This discovery will revolutionize our understanding of Benjamin Mitchell's work, said the professor as he examined a particularly impressive painting. Some of these pieces fill important gaps in his artistic chronology. Sarah watched the expert's work with a mixture of fascination and anxiety. On one hand, she was thrilled with the confirmation that she possessed a real fortune. On the other, she was beginning to understand the responsibilities and complexities that came with owning such valuable works of art. The conservation assistant discovered that several paintings were in perfect condition due to the controlled conditions of the attic, which had protected the works from humidity and direct light. Other pieces would need professional restoration to reach their maximum market value. During the cataloging process, Professor Thompson casually mentioned that there were other people interested in Benjamin Mitchell's works. He explained that some collectors had spent years looking for specific pieces and that the reappearance of this collection would cause a great stir in the art world. "You need to be very careful about how you announce this discovery," advised the professor. "There's a lot of money involved, and not everyone in the art world has honest intentions. I recommend you hire a specialized lawyer before making any important decisions." The warning about possible complications left Sarah worried. She had imagined that discovering the inheritance would be the hardest part, but she was beginning to realize that protecting and managing the fortune could be even more challenging. The day after the professor's visit, Sarah received an unexpected visit that would confirm her concerns. A well-dressed, middle-aged man appeared at her door, introducing himself as Richard Williams, director of an art gallery specializing in American artists. "I heard through Professor Thompson that you've discovered an important collection of Benjamin Mitchell," said Richard with a smile that Sarah found a bit forced. "I'd like to discuss the possibility of representing you in the marketing of these works." Sarah invited Richard in, but maintained some caution during the conversation. The man seemed to know details about the discovery that she didn't remember sharing with the professor, which made her suspicious of his true intentions. Richard explained that his gallery had international connections and could guarantee excellent prices for Benjamin's works. He mentioned having clients who had expressed specific interest in the paintings from the American Motherhood series and were willing to pay premium prices. "I can guarantee you'll receive at least $25 million for the complete collection," said Richard, a value even higher than Professor Thompson's initial estimate. "And I can arrange the sale within a few weeks, avoiding the complications of public auctions." The offer seemed tempting, but Sarah felt something wasn't right about Richard's hurry to close the deal. She thanked him for his interest, but said she needed more time to consider her options before making any decision. Richard insisted the opportunity was unique and that other buyers might lose interest if the negotiation was too prolonged. His insistence increased Sarah's suspicion, and she decided to end the meeting, promising to get in touch in a few days. After Richard left, Sarah called Professor Thompson to ask how the gallery director had obtained such detailed information about the discovery. The professor was surprised and explained that he had mentioned the discovery only to a few close colleagues, always in very general terms. "This Richard Williams who visited you," the professor said with concern. I don't know him personally. I recommend being very careful before making any agreement with him. There are people in the art world who take advantage of situations like yours. The conversation with the professor confirmed Sarah's suspicions about Richard. She decided to follow the advice of hiring a specialized lawyer before considering any proposal to sell the works. That night, as Sarah was putting Tommy to sleep, the boy asked a question that left her thoughtful. He wanted to know if they would sell all the paintings or if they would keep some as a memento of Uncle Benjamin they had just met. The question touched on something Sarah hadn't fully considered. The works weren't just monetary value, but also represented the emotional legacy left by Benjamin for his adoptive family. She began to consider the possibility of keeping at least a few pieces. The next day, Sarah visited the lawyer recommended by Professor Thompson, Dr. Paul Henry Anderson, who had an office in Williamsburg. The lawyer was a specialist in intellectual property law and had experience with issues involving inheritance of artworks. Dr. Paul carefully examined all documents related to the inheritance and confirmed that Sarah and Tommy had legitimate rights to the works. He also warned about common pitfalls involving inexperienced people in the art world. "This Mr. Richard Williams who visited you," said Dr. Paul after doing some checks, "does not have a good reputation in the art market. Several people have complained about questionable practices involving incorrect appraisals and unfavorable contracts." The confirmation of the suspicions about Richard made Sarah feel relieved that she had followed her instincts and rejected the hasty proposal. Dr. Paul recommended a more cautious and methodical approach to evaluating marketing options. The lawyer suggested obtaining independent appraisals from at least 3 different specialists before considering any sale. He also recommended researching the background of anyone who approached with offers, especially those that seemed urgent or too good to be true. During the following week, Sarah received several other approaches from people interested in Benjamin Mitchell's works. The news of the discovery had spread quickly in the art world, attracting both legitimate buyers and opportunists. One of the most interesting visits came from Dr. Catherine Roberts, curator of the Museum of Contemporary Art, Boston. She was not interested in buying the works, but wanted to discuss the possibility of a special exhibition dedicated to the rediscovered work of Benjamin Mitchell. "This discovery is a historic event for American art," explained Dr. Catherine. "An exhibition would allow the public to learn about unknown aspects of Benjamin's work, while increasing the value and recognition of the pieces." The exhibition proposal interested Sarah because it would allow her to honor Benjamin's memory while increasing the value of the works through greater public recognition. Dr. Catherine explained that successful exhibitions often resulted in significant increases in artists' market prices. Sarah scheduled a meeting with Dr. Paul to discuss the legal aspects of a possible exhibition. The lawyer explained that it would be necessary to consider issues of insurance, transportation, and security of the works, but that an exhibition at a respected institution could be very beneficial. While considering her options, Sarah received a completely unexpected visit that would once again change the course of the story. An elderly woman appeared at her door, introducing herself as Mrs. Margaret Mitchell, claiming to be a distant cousin of Benjamin and having rights to the works found. Mrs. Margaret presented documents that supposedly proved her relation to Benjamin and questioned the legitimacy of the will found by Sarah. The woman claimed that Benjamin had left a second, more recent will that distributed his works among several relatives. The claim deeply disturbed Sarah, who had begun to feel secure about her rights to the inheritance. Mrs. Margaret demanded access to the works to verify their authenticity and threatened legal action if Sarah did not cooperate. Dr. Paul examined the documents presented by Mrs. Margaret and discovered several inconsistencies suggesting forgery. The dates did not match other records, and some signatures appeared to have been forged. The lawyer advised Sarah not to provide access to the works without a court order. The situation became complicated when Mrs. Margaret returned, accompanied by Richard Williams, revealing that the two had been working together from the beginning. The alliance between them confirmed that Sarah was dealing with an organized attempt to defraud her legitimate inheritance. Richard admitted to using information obtained through Professor Thompson to locate Sarah and then contacted Mrs. Margaret to create a false claim scheme. The plan was to force Sarah to accept a division of the works or sell them quickly, for fear of losing everything in legal disputes. Dr. Paul threatened to sue Richard and Mrs. Margaret for attempted fraud and extortion if they continued to harass Sarah. The legal threats were effective, and the two backed down temporarily, but Sarah knew she would need to remain vigilant. The experience with the fraudsters made Sarah realize that her discovery had attracted unwanted and potentially dangerous attention. She decided to accelerate her plans to legally protect the inheritance and seriously consider the museum exhibition proposal. Dr. Catherine visited again to discuss details of the proposed exhibition. The museum offered to provide professional security for the works throughout the entire process, from transport to display, alleviating Sarah's concerns about the safety of the valuable pieces. The exhibition would be titled Benjamin Mitchell Rediscovered Works and would last 3 months, allowing enough time to attract visitors from across the country. The museum also committed to producing a professional catalogue of the works, creating permanent documentation of the discovery. Sarah agreed to the exhibition, seeing it as a way to protect the works while establishing their market value through institutional recognition. The decision would also give her time to carefully consider her long-term options. The preparation for the exhibition revealed additional details about the life and work of Benjamin Mitchell that not even Professor Thompson knew. Museum researchers discovered correspondence between Benjamin and other important artists of the time, placing his work in a broader historical context. One of the most exciting discoveries was a series of letters that Benjamin had written to Elizabeth Mitchell during their relationship, but which were never sent. The letters were stored with the works and revealed the depth of the love he felt for his adoptive family. The unsent letters confirmed that Benjamin considered Robert as a son and Tommy as a grandson, even without direct blood ties. They also revealed that he had carefully planned the inheritance as a way to secure the future of the family he loved. Reading the letters deeply moved Sarah and strengthened her conviction that she was fulfilling Benjamin's true wishes by accepting the inheritance. She shared some appropriate passages with Tommy, helping him understand the emotional connection to the uncle he had never met in person. The museum exhibition was an extraordinary success, attracting visitors from across the country and generating coverage in the national media. Benjamin's works were recognized as exceptional examples of contemporary American art, significantly increasing their market value. During the exhibition, Sarah received several legitimate offers from collectors and museums interested in acquiring specific pieces. The amounts offered confirmed and even exceeded Professor Thompson's original estimates. One of the most interesting offers came from the National Museum of Fine Arts, Washington, which wanted to acquire the complete American Motherhood series for its permanent collection. The proposal included not only an excellent sum, but also the guarantee that the works would remain accessible to the American public. Sarah seriously considered the museum's offer because it met both her financial needs and her desire to honor Benjamin's memory appropriately. Dr. Paul confirmed that the proposal was legitimate and financially advantageous. After consulting Tommy, who supported the decision to sell part of the works to the museum, Sarah closed a deal to sell the American Motherhood series for $8,500,000. She decided to keep some other pieces as a permanent family inheritance. The sale provided complete financial security for Sarah and Tommy, allowing her to plan the future without monetary worries. She used part of the funds to completely renovate the house at St. Benedict's Studio, transforming it into a residence worthy of the artistic history it housed. Sarah also established an educational fund for Tommy, ensuring he would have access to the best possible education. Furthermore, she set aside resources to maintain and preserve the works she decided to keep, treating them as family heritage. The entire experience had taught Sarah about the importance of caution in situations involving large sums of money, but also about the value of trusting her instincts when something didn't seem right. She felt proud of having successfully navigated all the complexities of the situation. Professor Thompson continued as Sarah's informal consultant, helping her better understand the art world and the responsibilities of being the guardian of culturally important works. He often visited to see how the remaining pieces were being preserved. Dr. Catherine became a close friend, offering guidance on issues related to the conservation and display of the works Sarah kept. The museum also committed to supporting any future exhibitions of the remaining pieces. The transformation in Sarah and Tommy's life was complete and permanent. From a situation of financial uncertainty and social isolation, they became part of a community of people interested in art and culture, finding purpose and meaning beyond material security. The house at St. Benedict's Studio became an occasional visiting place for art students and researchers interested in the work of Benjamin Mitchell. Sarah took pride in being able to share the story of the discovery and keep the artist's memory alive. Tommy developed a genuine interest in art, inspired by the discovery of the inheritance and the cultural environment he began to frequent. Sarah enrolled him in painting classes, where he demonstrated a natural talent that might have been a distant genetic inheritance from his adoptive grandfather. The initially hesitant community of Fredericksburg gradually accepted Sarah and Tommy as an important part of local history. The discovery of Benjamin's works brought positive attention to the town, benefiting local tourism and the economy. Christine Mitchell became a regular presence in Sarah's life, sharing memories of Benjamin and helping to preserve the family history. She felt relieved to finally be able to properly honor her brother's memory and to see his wishes to care for Rosa's family fulfilled. Dr. Paul continued as Sarah's lawyer, helping her manage the legal aspects of her new financial situation and protect herself against future attempts at fraud. His guidance was crucial in allowing her to safely enjoy her good fortune. The story of the discovery caught the attention of other art researchers, resulting in new studies on Benjamin Mitchell that expanded the knowledge of his contribution to American art. Sarah felt honored to have played an important role in this resurgence of interest in the artist's work. 2 years after the initial discovery, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary changes in her life as she watched Tommy paint at an easel set up in Benjamin's old studio. The boy had fallen in love with art and was showing impressive progress in his creations. Sarah's daily routine now included activities she had never imagined possible in her previous life as a widow struggling financially. She met with researchers, participated in cultural events, and had gradually become an advocate for the preservation of American artistic heritage. The works Sarah kept in her personal collection continued to appreciate in value, but she had no intention of selling them. They represented not only financial worth, but the emotional connection to Benjamin and the cultural legacy she was preserving for future generations of the family. Sarah occasionally received offers from buyers interested in the remaining works, but she had learned to carefully assess each person's motivations and credentials before considering any negotiation. Her experience with Richard Williams and Mrs. Margaret Mitchell had taught her the importance of caution. The house at St. Benedict's Studio had been completely restored, but Sarah kept Benjamin's original studio exactly as he had left it, creating a permanent memorial to the artist. She often took Tommy to the space so he could feel the connection with his adoptive uncle. The neighbors who had initially looked with suspicion at Sarah's change in circumstances now respected her as an important member of the community. Her discretion and generosity had won local trust, and many sought her advice on important matters. Sarah established a small scholarship for local young artists, using part of her new wealth to support emerging talent in the region. The program became popular and well-respected, creating opportunities for people who otherwise would not have access to professional art education. The experience had taught Sarah about the social responsibility that accompanies sudden wealth. She strove to use her resources in a way that honored both Benjamin's memory and the values she wanted to instill in Tommy. Professor Thompson often commented that the discovery of Benjamin Mitchell's works had been one of the most important of his career. He credited Sarah for handling the situation in an exemplary manner, protecting the works while allowing them to be properly studied and appreciated. Dr. Catherine continued to work with Sarah on projects related to Benjamin's works. The museum was planning a second exhibition focusing on the technical aspects of the painter's art, using the pieces Sarah had kept as examples from different periods of his artistic evolution. The unsent correspondence between Benjamin and Elizabeth Mitchell had become the subject of academic study, offering unique insights into the emotional life of an important artist. Sarah allowed controlled access to these letters, always preserving the privacy and dignity of the people involved. Tommy now spoke of Benjamin as Uncle Benjamin naturally, showing he had internalized the family connection in a healthy way. He demonstrated genuine pride in his artistic heritage and a growing responsibility to preserve the artist's memory. The most significant transformation in Sarah's life was perhaps the self-confidence she had developed through the process. From an insecure and financially vulnerable woman, she had become a respected person capable of making important decisions about complex issues. Sarah kept a journal where she recorded reflections on her extraordinary journey, documenting not only the external events, but also her personal growth. She hoped these notes could one day help other people in similar situations. The house that Sarah had bought for $1,200 was now worth much more than the original price, but not because of the artworks it contained. The property had become historic in its own right, as the site where one of the most important discoveries in recent American art had occurred. 3 years after the initial discovery, Sarah received an invitation to speak at a conference on American cultural heritage. She had become a respected authority on the subject of artistic heritage preservation based on her unique and successful experience. During her presentation at the conference, Sarah emphasized the importance of a careful approach and professional consultation when dealing with valuable art discoveries. She told her story as an example of how it is possible to successfully navigate the complexities involved. The conference audience included other art owners, museum curators, and specialized lawyers. Sarah felt honored to be able to contribute to the education of people facing challenges similar to those she had overcome. After the conference, Sarah was approached by a publisher interested in publishing a book about her experience. The prospect of sharing her story more broadly excited her, especially if it could help other people avoid pitfalls or maximize similar opportunities. The book would become not only the narrative of an extraordinary discovery, but also a practical guide on how to handle unexpected artistic heritage. Sarah worked with professional writers to ensure the information was presented clearly and usefully. Tommy, now 13, had become a talented young artist creating his own works while studying the techniques employed by Benjamin. His paintings showed a clear influence from his adoptive uncle, but also an independent and promising artistic personality. Sarah often organized small exhibitions of Tommy's works in the house, inviting friends and neighbors to see his progress. These occasions became important social events in the community, strengthening the bonds Sarah had developed with local residents. Sarah's story had become a local legend in Fredericksburg, told and retold with variations that sometimes exaggerated the dramatic details. She was amused by some fanciful versions, but always corrected incorrect information when she had the opportunity. The financial success allowed Sarah to fulfill dreams she had abandoned during the difficult years after her husband's loss. She traveled with Tommy to see great museums across the country, expanding the artistic knowledge of both and creating precious memories. Sarah was also able to arrange excellent medical care for her own elderly mother, who lived in a distant city. The ability to ensure comfort and security for her extended family represented one of the deepest satisfactions of her new situation. Experience had taught Sarah about the importance of maintaining proper perspective on material wealth. She made an effort to instill in Tommy values of social responsibility and gratitude, using practical examples of how to use resources to benefit others. Sarah established a tradition of weekly dinners with Christine Mitchell, strengthening the family connection and preserving memories about Benjamin. These conversations often revealed new details about the artist's life that enriched the understanding of his work and personality. Christine had become a second grandmother to Tommy, sharing stories about the Mitchell family and helping to build a sense of family identity that the boy had lacked after the loss of his father. Her presence filled an important emotional gap. Dr. Paul continued as Sarah's legal advisor, but their relationship had evolved into a genuine friendship based on mutual respect. He often praised Sarah for her prudent and ethical approach to managing her new wealth. Professor Thompson had become a father figure to Sarah, offering guidance not only on artistic matters, but also on life in general. His experience and wisdom were valuable resources she consulted regularly. Dr. Catherine had included Sarah in the social circle of important people, in the American art community. The friendships she developed in this environment provided intellectual stimulation and opportunities for continuous personal growth. The house at St. Benedict's Studio had become a cultural landmark in the region, with occasional visitors interested in seeing where the famous discovery happened. Sarah received these visits with hospitality, always willing to share the inspiring story. Sarah maintained regular correspondence with other collectors of American art, exchanging information on preservation, conservation, and research. These connections had created a valuable professional support network for issues related to her collection. Sarah's transformation from an impoverished widow to a respected guardian of cultural heritage had inspired other women in the community to pursue their own dreams with greater determination. She took pride in serving as a positive example of overcoming adversity and success. Tommy often expressed gratitude for the extraordinary change in their circumstances, but Sarah always emphasized that true wealth lay in family relationships and opportunities for personal growth, not just in financial resources. Experience had taught Sarah about the importance of balancing the preservation of cultural heritage with the practical needs of daily life. She managed to find a way to honor the past while building a prosperous future for her family. Sarah occasionally reflected on how her life might have been different if she hadn't had the courage to buy the mysterious house for such a low price. The risky decision had proven to be the most important of her life, completely transforming her prospects. The book about her experience was progressing well, with Sarah working carefully to ensure the narrative was both entertaining and practical education. She wanted others to be able to learn from her experiences and avoid common mistakes. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this moving story and where you're watching from. Leave your comment, sharing what you felt while following Sarah and Tommy's journey. Do you believe Sarah made the right decisions in dealing with her extraordinary discovery? We would love to read your honest opinion about this story of overcoming and hope.